Beef. Beef is not the most consumed meat in the world. Pork takes that title. But it is the most culturally significant red meat on the planet, and the one that has built the most elaborate rituals around how it should be raised, aged, and cooked. Its reputation comes down to one thing that no other animal on this list produces quite the same way: marbling. Those thin white threads of fat running through the muscle melt during cooking and baste the meat from the inside, creating the juiciness and depth of flavor that makes a great steak genuinely different from everything else. The United States, Argentina, Brazil, and Australia are the biggest consumers and producers, each with their own culture around how beef should be handled. The ribeye delivers the most flavor because of its high fat content. The tenderloin, also called filet mignon, is the most tender cut but leaner, with a cleaner, more delicate taste. The sirloin sits between the two: good marbling, good tenderness, reliable in almost any preparation. Beyond steaks, beef appears in hamburgers, roast beef, slow-cooked stews like beef bourguignon, and raw preparations like carpaccio. It's a meat that works across every cooking method and nearly every cuisine on Earth. Lamb and mutton. Lamb is the dominant red meat across the Middle East, Turkey, Greece, and New Zealand, and it has been central to those food cultures for thousands of years. The distinction between lamb and mutton matters. Lamb refers to animals slaughtered before 12 months of age, producing tender, mild meat, while mutton comes from older animals and carries a significantly stronger, more pronounced flavor that divides opinion sharply. The fat in lamb is distributed differently than in beef. Rather than marbling through the muscle, it sits in thicker layers around the outside and between sections, giving the meat a rich, slightly gamey quality that becomes more intense the older the animal was. Lamb chops are the most prized cut, tender enough to cook quickly over high heat. The leg is ideal for roasting whole, especially slow roasted until the meat falls away from the bone. The shoulder has more connective tissue and rewards long, slow cooking that breaks everything down into something deeply savory. Across its home regions, lamb appears in kebabs, slow roasted whole for celebrations, and in stews that have been cooking the same way for centuries. Goat. Goat is the most widely eaten meat on the planet when you count by global population. More people eat goat regularly than eat beef or lamb. Yet it remains almost invisible in Western food culture. It's the staple red meat across large parts of India, Nigeria, and the Caribbean, where it's been eaten for thousands of years without ever needing the kind of marketing that beef receives. The meat is extremely lean, with very little fat compared to every other animal on this list, which means it can't rely on fat to carry flavor the way beef does. Instead, goat develops its flavor through slow cooking, long braises, deep stews, curries with hours of gentle heat that break down the muscle fibers and allow spices to penetrate the meat completely. Rushed goat is tough and unremarkable. Given time, it becomes tender and distinctively flavored, not as strong as mutton, earthier than beef, and with a quality that absorbs surrounding flavors better than almost any other red meat. Goat curry is arguably one of the most consumed meat dishes in the world by sheer volume, even if most Western food culture has never noticed. Camel. Camel meat is eaten primarily across the Middle East and North Africa, where camels have been domesticated for over 3,000 years and serve multiple purposes: transport, milk, and meat. The flavor sits closer to beef than to any other animal on this list, but with a subtle sweetness that experienced eaters notice immediately. The texture is coarser than beef, with a grain that reflects the animal's enormous muscle mass developed through constant movement across difficult terrain. Younger camels produce more tender meat, while older animals are better suited to slow cooking and stewing. The best cuts come from the back muscles and ribs, where the meat is densest. In Gulf countries, camel meat appears in burgers, grilled preparations, and slow-cooked stews that are considered celebratory food served at weddings and large gatherings rather than as everyday eating. The hump, which stores fat rather than water as is commonly believed, is considered a delicacy in some regions, prized for its richness in the same way that fatty cuts of beef are prized elsewhere. Water buffalo. Water buffalo meat is the primary red meat across large parts of India, Pakistan, and Nepal, where it fills a cultural role that beef cannot. Beef is restricted by religious observance in Hindu-majority communities, while buffalo is not subject to the same prohibitions. Nutritionally, it sits in an interesting position on this list. The flavor profile is close enough to beef that most people eating it for the first time can't immediately distinguish it, but the fat content is significantly lower. Less marbling means a leaner, slightly firmer texture that some find cleaner and others find less indulgent than well-marbled beef. The ribeye and sirloin cuts mirror beef preparation closely and can be cooked the same way: grilled, seared, or slow roasted. Buffalo burgers and curries are the most common preparations across South Asia. In Italy, water buffalo is primarily raised for milk to produce mozzarella di bufala rather than for meat, which means the same animal sits at the center of two entirely different food traditions, depending on which side of the world you're standing on. Pork. Pork is the most consumed meat on Earth by total volume, more than beef, lamb, or any other animal on this list. China alone accounts for roughly half of all global pork consumption, and it sits at the center of food culture across Germany, Spain, and the United States as well. What makes pork genuinely different from every other meat here is the range within a single animal. The tenderloin is one of the leanest cuts anywhere, mild, delicate, and quick to cook. The belly, from the same animal, is one of the fattiest things you can put on a plate, rendering down into something deeply rich during cooking. The shoulder breaks down over long, slow cooking into pulled pork, one of the most satisfying preparations in all of barbecue. Then there's everything pork becomes through curing and smoking: bacon, ham, prosciutto, chorizo, salami, preserved products with centuries-long traditions across nearly every culture that eats it. No other animal on this list transforms into as many different things as the pig does. Wild boar. Wild boar is the ancestor of domestic pork, the same species but shaped by a completely different life. Where farmed pigs are bred for maximum fat and rapid growth, wild boars spend their lives moving through forests, eating roots, acorns, and whatever they find. That life produces meat that is leaner than domestic pork, darker in color, and significantly richer in flavor. It's widely eaten across Italy, France, and Germany, where wild boar populations support both hunting traditions and commercial farming of semi-wild animals. The leg and shoulder are the most used cuts, both requiring slow cooking to break down the muscle built through constant movement. Wild boar rag, slow cooked with red wine, herbs, and tomatoes, is one of the defining dishes of Tuscan cuisine, served over pappardelle pasta. Sausages and cured preparations are common across Central Europe, where the stronger flavor is considered an asset. It's the clearest example on this list of how an animal's environment writes itself directly into the flavor of the meat. Venison, deer, and roe deer. Venison covers several deer species, but the two most commonly eaten are roe deer in Central Europe and white-tailed deer in North America. Both produce very lean, dark red meat with a distinctive wild flavor that comes from the animal's diet of grasses, herbs, and forest plants. The backstrap, running along either side of the spine, is the most prized cut, tender enough to cook quickly like a steak, with a clean, rich flavor that delivers everything venison promises without being overwhelming. The legs are better suited to slow cooking or grinding into sausage. Because venison has almost no fat, it overcooks faster than beef and is best served medium rare. The wild flavor is present but cleaner than mutton or wild boar, more herbal than gamey when the animal is handled properly. Venison steak, stew, and sausages are the most common preparations across both Europe and North America. Moose and reindeer. Moose and reindeer represent the northernmost red meats on this list, both deeply embedded in the food cultures of Scandinavia and northern Canada. Reindeer meat has been central to the indigenous people of northern Scandinavia for centuries, where herding these animals has always been both a way of life and a cultural tradition passed down through generations. The most famous preparation is porankristis, thinly sliced reindeer sautéed in butter and served with mashed potato and lingonberry jam. The flavor is mild for a game meat, slightly sweet and leaner than beef. Moose is hunted rather than farmed across Canada and Scandinavia, produces larger cuts and a slightly stronger flavor, still clean compared to wild boar or mutton, but unmistakably wild. Both animals are extremely lean, which means they overcook quickly and work best as burgers, steaks, and slow-cooked stews. In the communities where these animals have been eaten for generations, they aren't exotic. They're simply what meat is. Kangaroo. Kangaroo is one of the leanest red meats in the world. leaner than venison, leaner than goat, with a fat content so low it sits closer nutritionally to chicken breast than to beef. It's eaten almost exclusively in Australia, where managed harvesting is considered both economically practical and environmentally necessary. The flavor is stronger than beef, distinctly gamey in a way that reflects the animal's wild diet of native grasses and shrubs. The fillet and backstrap are the best cuts, suited to quick high-heat cooking, but because there's almost no fat, the margin between perfectly cooked and overdone is very narrow. A kangaroo steak taken past medium is dry and tough in a way that a well-marbled ribeye never would be. If you found this useful, hit that like button and subscribe. There's a lot more food content like this coming your way.